while Babylon's fierce star is rising. The Bible describes the Babylonian attack. Homes are pillaged, King Solomon's temple is set ablaze and utterly destroyed. 10,000 Israelite captives, princes, soldiers, artisans, and scribes, all are led to Babylon in chains. The Israelites crossed more than 500 miles of desert, following ancient trade routes across modern-day Jordan, Syria, and Iraq to Babylon. In Psalms 137, the Israelites lament, "By the rivers of Babylon there we sat down and wept when we remembered Zion. How shall we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land?" Broken and exhausted, the Israelites entered Babylon in awe of its scope and frenzy. Torn from the modest city of Jerusalem, they beheld the majestic capital of the ancient world. But somehow, the Israelites managed to do more than sing the Lord's song in this foreign land. They also wrote it down.
If you look at any piece of oral literature and then you write it down, you're formalizing it. You're immediately setting down a text which people can criticize or can say, this is the truth, everything else is wrong. That, I think, is the biggest effect of writing down the Bible or the Old Testament.
Today, the reconstructed walls surrounding Babylon are stamped with the name Saddam Hussein. But once the bricks bore another name, King Nebuchadnezzar. This was a land of many gods and pagan idols, an unlikely birthplace for one of the world's most sacred texts. Yet Babylon's great diversity created the perfect climate.
And they come into this cosmopolitan environment. Even the most educated among them and literate among them were being bombarded with direct contact with other people. And I mean other people.
The Israelites found themselves in a melting pot of different races and languages, conflicting gods and alien demons. What city is this, the book of Revelation would ask, clothed in purple and scarlet and decked with gold and pearls? The habitation of devils and the hold of every foul spirit, Babylon the Great, mother of harlots and the abominations of the earth. But among all the abominations, even perhaps because of them, this was where the Bible first became a book. Threatened by an overwhelming new culture, Hebrew scribes were desperate to preserve and solidify Jewish identity. Over 3 generations of captivity, the scribes unified Israel's oral tradition, new writings, and sacred texts into a single manuscript. The Bible was born.
Fortunately for them, the Babylonians were pretty liberal. They allowed them to keep their own culture, their own religion, to study their own books. This is what preserved the Bible to this very day.
But as the books of the Bible came together over the long years of exile, Babylonian culture would profoundly influence the work of the Israelite scribes.
These were very literate people, I suspect, many of the people who went into exile. And scribes talked to scribes, and I'm sure that was how a lot of information was transmitted. And the exchange of ideas and knowledge must have been, I would use the word devastating. It must have been mind-blowing.
The Bible would eventually reflect stories and traditions from Babylon and even earlier Mesopotamian civilizations. The Israelites couldn't easily ignore Babylon's thriving culture and great monuments. Its temples were among the largest structures in the ancient world.
Big public buildings, the ceremonial walkway, the palace of Nebuchadnezzar with its legendary hanging gardens, palm trees, the river. If you had walked through the Ishtar Gate, you would have felt dwarfed. And this was deliberate. You were in the presence of something powerful. But on all sides of it was the city, the people, the commoners, narrow, winding alleyways, rows and rows of small stores, donkeys braying, crowds of people walking, small, closely knit quarters teeming with life.
And it was here, the Bible tells us, that one of antiquity's most extraordinary monuments soared into the sky, the Tower of Babel. For ages, adventurers and pilgrims hoped that finding the famous tower would prove the truth of Bible stories. One seeker who failed would write,
"No man durst go near to the tower, for it is all desert and full of dragons and great serpents, and full of diverse venomous beasts."
Medieval travelers claimed they had found the tower, this spiral minaret still standing in northern Iraq. But they were wrong. This tower was built 1,500 years too late and far from the walls of Babylon. Perhaps the most intriguing possibility was posed by Robert Koldewey, a German archaeologist. In the early 1900s, he discovered a rectangular ditch with only a few ancient bricks remaining. Many experts believe Koldewey had found all that survives of the famous tower. Babylon's great monuments made a strong impression on the biblical scribes. But her most enduring legacy, surviving to this day, is a Babylonian innovation far more impressive still: the rule of law. Babylon was the first civilization on Earth to have a written legal code. The original carved stone is an astonishing relic. Lost for hundreds of years, it would emerge in the late 19th century, a stone engraved with one of the most important legal documents of all time. 1,200 years before the Israelites were taken captive, a Babylonian king had this stone carved with the laws that bear his name, Hammurabi's Code. These writings can be read as precursors to the legal code in Exodus, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy.
In societies where knowledge and law is transmitted orally and dealt with orally, precedent is terribly important. When it got written down, the people who wrote it down had immense power.
Hammurabi's Code has influenced nearly every civilization since Babylon. Today, even some of its more primitive methods of judgment survive virtually intact. Hammurabi described a ritual called the ordeal, a painful, even deadly test of guilt or innocence. In some remote Bedouin tribes, the ordeal is still practiced, much as it was in the time of Hammurabi. In this rare footage, a holy man called the Mubashi will judge the accused by examining their tongues after they lick a red-hot iron spoon. These men have been accused of theft. They must submit to the ordeal or be found guilty by default. Family members look on anxiously as the young men prepare themselves for the painful ritual. Water doesn't ease the pain. It's meant to cleanse and purify the drinker and to ready him for judgment. The holy man prays and then examines the singed tongues, seeking a sign from God. Only the Mubashi can divine guilt or innocence, and he alone will determine the men's fate. At last, a verdict. One man is found innocent, to the great relief of his family. The other is not as fortunate. Declared guilty, he will be fined for his crime. The ordeal is an intriguing modern-day echo of Hammurabi, but his laws reach even more directly into the present through the Bible.
Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor.
The Ten Commandments, the foundation of biblical law, and yet only the beginning of a complex set of codes and covenants central to the Old Testament. And in these laws, the clear voice of Hammurabi can still be heard.
Hammurabi set down laws. He didn't innovate a great deal. He merely set down in writing laws which had operated by precedent for hundreds, if not thousands of years, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and principles like this, many of which are still codified in law today.
But the Babylon that shaped the Bible and its laws had its roots in an even earlier civilization, one that reached its peak 7 centuries before Christ. It was the brutal empire of Assyria, a place the Bible called a land bathed in blood.